911 dispatchers of Reddit. What is a seemingly dumb call you got which turned out to be serious? Not a dispatcher, was USAF security forces a long time ago. Call was a kid home alone, about a monster in the closet. Which was a bit weird, because the kid seemed a bit old for that. Holy fuck, there's a snake in the closet that's gotta be at least 150 pounds. Promptly close closet door. Nope, right the fuck on out of that. Kid in hand. Called animal control. Called parent. Parent arrives first, indicates they don't even own a snake, let alone a people-sized snake. All parties agree monster in closet was accurate enough description of event. Got a call where the caller was on the highway and just screaming. Couldn't figure out what was wrong because he was so amped up. Ended up being someone got hit by a semi-truck or something, and the body parts were all over the highway. Yikes. Not dumb, but it was a seemingly minor, by the way it was portrayed to me. An elderly woman called her doctor, i.e. standard GP at her local clinic, and said her husband had accidentally shot himself and needed to let them know. The GP calls emergency and lets us know as they thought it sounded minor, but police needed to be aware due to the gun aspect. Turns out I call her, she sounds very surprised police were calling her, and says in her old lady voice, "Oh, you know, has a silly old man has shot himself in the garage." I ask where he is injured, and she says has shot himself in the face, completely calm and serious. He had blown half his jaw off whilst sitting in the chair in the garage, and was bleeding profusely. I think he wouldn't have survived, but I'm unsure. I'll never forget her saying silly insert name here, what have you done to yourself, in a sweet, calm, caring old lady voice. It's very interesting as a dispatcher to be exposed to how people react when they are in shock. So this might fit in here. Sorta, kinda. I lived in Germany. Military firefighter slash dispatcher. One time I got a call from the post office saying that their scanners were going off and they had found something suspicious. It's pretty late. It's about 2 in the morning. Cold, snowy. I contacted one of our chiefs and dispatched him to go check it out. We got frequent calls like that. It's usually malfunctioning sensors. As I was told, CH2 did their usual checks. By as he was getting to his final check, he examined the Ray photo. Then about 30 minutes go by since I checked him out of the station, and casually over the net, CH2 says, "Yeah, dispatch, imminent EOD. We have a grenade at the post office." My peanuts rise into my stomach. I end up calling hazmat teams, EMS, EOD, SF, M, more fire units. They cordoned off everything. It was the biggest shit show to scrabble and get everyone that late at night. Once all units were here, it took about 2 hours to find the man who the package belonged to. EOD also pulled the package into their little safe box thingy, so that if it goes off they can contain its blast. The IC and other command sections finally asked the man to come up and explain his side. From what I was told, he was a newer military member, and this next shit is too fucking crazy to not make up. This dude gets escorted by EOD and is like, "Yeah, that's my package, what's up?" They explain there's a grenade in it, and if someone wants to hurt him, etc. etc. He says no, nobody wants to hurt me. Apparently he was pretty short about the questions. Then without missing a fucking beat, he reaches into the box, grabs the fucking thing like can I, handles his MacBooks, and says, "No, it's just my paperweight I bought. It's a replica, not real." I swear you've never seen so many people wanted to kill a man for the time he wasted. I laughed because it made my night shift go by quick. Noise complaint. Neighbor playing music too loud and no complainant. Only reason an officer responded was because he was bored. Turns out it was a 14-year-old girl whose parents were out of town. She invited the 25-year-old man from a town 3 hours away to come over and have sex with her all night long. Cop showed up and found him, some beer and a bunch of condoms laying around. He went to jail. She went to the children's home till her parents could get back. Not dispatcher but paramedic. Got called to a woman who told emergency she had hurt her knee. Literally what it said on our dispatch screen. This woman had been a serial caller for all sorts of trivial non-emergency complaints in the past. The local ambulance area manager had been to talk to her about appropriate use of ambulance resources, but nonetheless we didn't think much of it. Arrived and her right leg was nearly twice the size of her left leg. Her kneecap wasn't even visible, although some light palpation seemed to indicate it was about 15 centimeters further around her leg than it should have been. Turns out the previous afternoon she had hurt it when she had fallen about 2 meters off a ladder whilst fixing a gutter. Didn't think to tell dispatch this, but wasn't sure if it was bad enough to call the ambulance or go to hospital. She also though maybe she lost consciousness for a few minutes but wasn't sure. Her leg was so unbelievably swollen and unbendable there was no way she was going to be able to get it into a car, let alone how she would have driven herself with a dislocated knee as she lived alone and had limited support. So we reassured her it was a good use of our resources and encouraged her in the future to call the medical advice line after future injuries if she wasn't sure whether to call the ambulance. This is more on the EMT side and not really dumb, but all the time people call 911 and tell them someone, their parent slash spouse slash child slash etc, is unresponsive and breathing. It sucks when you get there and they are actually just having agonal respirations. Aka things just got way more serious. Agonal respirations are not sufficient breathing and are merely a reflex the body has when there's insufficient oxygen. A lot of times the family member didn't realize this was not adequate breathing and didn't start CPR, allowing for brain damage via oxygen deprivation. SAT. I work in police records, so I get to hear calls go out, talk to the cops, etc. A call comes in for an abandoned motorcycle on the side of the road. State patrol goes out, sees a motorcycle propped against the guardrail with heavy damage. Take a look around, don't see anyone. Have it towed. Next day, a missing person report comes in, and we figure out that the towed MC belongs to the missing guy. They go back out and find his body about 50 yards back from where the bike was found. So, abandoned bike turned into a body recovery. That one stuck with me for a while. Poor guy just laying out there for a few days with everyone driving by. I live in Washington, so there is a lot of brush and trees right along the road in some places. Got a call from Life Alert one time, saying that one of their clients was stuck in her kitchen because her wheelchair got stuck on a cupboard. She wasn't injured, just needed to get unstuck. Wasn't an urgent call, and it was a busy night, so the road sergeant had to pull a unit off the call twice due to more urgent calls. After he pulled the second unit he said he would go and help her while the other calls were being handled. When she arrived the caller's front door was open with just the screen door in place. It was a nice day for a breeze. She could see the caller from the screen door and tried to ask if there was a way to unlock the screen or if she would have to cut it to get in. The caller was not responsive to our sergeant, so she called on the radio that we should have FD en route and that she was going to have to cut the screen door to make entry. When our sergeant made it in, she found that the caller was sitting in her chair at the sink and was washing dishes. The caller appeared to have dropped a knife and cut into her ankle. She was unable to bend down to stop the bleeding and was on blood thinners. She did not make it. Former dispatcher took a normal call. Guy reported his call stolen. Woke up from a nap. Car was gone. Not much to go on. Take the report. Move along to the next call. Fast forward a few years later, I'm not working as a dispatcher anymore, but the police arrive and hand me a subpoena. Weird, not weird as a dispatcher, happens all the time. So, I go to court, meet the Crown, and they had me a transcript of the case and ask me if I remember it. I read the first couple of lines of the transcript, totally remember the call and the conversation, despite being several years prior, and proceed to give them the general idea of the entire call, from only having read a couple of lines. Crown, perfect thanks. Defense, Crown, we won't need you any longer. I still never found out why the whole thing had actually made it to court in the first place. But based on the lawyers that were present, I could safely say it wasn't just a stolen car. Not dispatcher, but dumb call. I work at an urgent care, and a lady called and casually said her son was struck by lightning. He seemed fine, but his primary doc wanted her to take him in for an EKG and to check out his cardiac enzymes. Told her to go to the emergency room. And she said, well, can't you do an EKG? Bitch, your son was struck by lightning. He needs to be monitored, as these symptoms can show up later. His heart rhythm is probably fucked. Caller called in on a roadside help phone. Started yelling about being kidnapped and trying to be killed out in the desert. Hung up. Eventually got units out there, and sure enough he's hiding in the bushes, duct taped and tied up, and tire tracks nearby where he escaped from them. Said he had seen them driving by, which was why he had to hang up and hide. Never did find the kidnappers though. We all assumed it was a hoax from the initial call and disconnect. Really late to the party, but it's worth telling. My center took a call from a number like 5 times in an hour. Always radio silence on the other end. On the 6th call we finally heard enough of a voice to know someone was there, and got an address and enough to know it was serious. Make entry to the house and find the caller. A man had picked up his soon-to-be ex-girlfriend to talk. He then duct taped her mouth and zip tied her wrists and ankles, and spent the next 14 hours beating her with a bat, raping her, used a blowtorch to give her 2nd-degree burns all over her legs and genitals, and broke her cheekbone. It was an absolutely terrifying moment, and what made it worse was on review of the tape we could hear her say help on one of the previous calls, but couldn't hear it on the initial call-in. Not an officer. I was hanging out with a few of my mates. We were playing truth or dare. One of my friends were dared to stand in cement until it had hardened. By the time we realized how dumb of an idea this was, he had become part of the ground. Luckily, dispatch came over the instant we called them, but we got a lecture about not wasting their time. We did the same thing 2 days later. Not mine but my cousin. Got a call from a young woman, went like this. Cousin. 911, what's your emerg person? Mumbling whispering cousin. What, I can't understand you ma'am. Person. Mumbling whispering cousin. What's the address person? Asterisk 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 road cousin. Okay man, what's the problem? Person. Still whispering there's a giant man in my house cousin. Okay ma person. Screams bloody murder. So story behind this is that the young girl was home alone and the girl's parents were at work. A man saw the house and since there was no cars there he thought no one was home and broken through the window, and as he was breaking in she hid under her bed and called the cops. But the thing was she went under her bed where she wasn't facing the door, which means she couldn't see him walk in, and her foot was sticking out, and he grabbed her legs and pulled her out and stabbed her, but she survived thankfully. So yeah. My uncle was a cop, and I was with him by his car, and got this call. A person said her daughter was going to be arrested and wanted to know what she did wrong. They were puzzled and thought it was a prank call. A lady called saying her daughter called her because she was pulled over at the garbage dump and police were searching her because they spotted a couple of empty beer boxes in the back of the truck she was driving. The officer wasn't listening to her when she said she was taking them to the dump. The police said it is probably a story because none of their officers were on that road. My uncle was out on patrol and saw another officer. He radioed and asked if there was anyone at the dump. He said he didn't know of any of the officers being there. My uncle responded to the scene and found a girl pulled over. My uncle stopped the scene to find out it was a fake cop. So we got a call from a couple a few years back that said they had dated edibles and thought they were gonna die and all that. Obviously we thought they were just anxious from the marijuana. It turned out, when we got to their apartment, that the marijuana they had gotten was laced, and we had to rush them to the emergency room, because when we got there they were passed out. So that's my story, Reddit.